I couldn't go into the office with her, and I get a text from my wife saying we lost our second born to a miscarriage, and I couldn't be sitting next to her.
Welcome to Middle Ground Mike, everybody. The man who wants to run Michigan is here to make his case. But after years of broken promises from politicians, why should anyone seem to trust them? Well, State Senator Aric Nesbitt joins me now. Senator Nesbitt, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Joseph. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience as we work on ways to really, as we've seen out of Michigan, it's been tougher and tougher for families to make it here. And I'm running for governor so that everybody can make it in Michigan again. And unfortunately, out of Lansing, the Democrats have increased the cost of living, taxes, indoctrinated our kids with woke nonsense and given free housing to illegal immigrants. And I'm running to eliminate the state's property tax, lower the cost of energy, and really work to rip out this woke nonsense from our schools and make sure that we ban sanctuary cities. And so that's how you make sure everybody can make it in Michigan.
No, I mean, those are very great points. What is so fundamentally broke in Michigan right now that you believe we can get fixed easily, especially with your leadership?
Yeah, somebody who grew up on a farm, family's been in Michigan for 7 generations, in the same township for 6 generations. I know the value of hard work. I know the value of what it means to go out there and work in 90-degree weather, baling hay and having to sleep on the main floor because we didn't have air conditioning growing up. Working my way through Hillsdale College, having 5 jobs to be able to work through there, getting my degree in economics. And now I have a young family, 3 young kids. I just remember 6 years ago during COVID when we were expecting our second born. And I drove my wife to the OB's office. And because of Governor Whitmer and the Democrats in Lansing, the worst thing that could happen in a parent's life, losing a child, that I couldn't be comforting her. And what happened then should never happen again. And that's really why I'm running for governor, is that I believe in the individual. I don't, instead of the state, families instead of government. And right now in Michigan, we're bottom 10 in education, 44th in reading. 3 out of 5 fourth graders can't read at grade level. Second slowest growth state in the nation. The average family in Michigan makes $9,000 less than the average family does nationally. And that really wheezes families here in the state of Michigan. As I go around the state, I remember talking to a guy up in Gladwin, moved from Tennessee to Michigan. You don't meet too many of these folks that actually move from Tennessee to Michigan because Tennessee is a no income tax state, right to work state, no statewide property taxes. And he says he adds up his bills locally at energy and insurance and taxes, and he figures he spends $5,000 more per year for the privilege of living in Michigan than in Tennessee. And I don't know about you, but as a farm boy, $5,000 is a lot of money. And so I'm running for governor to eliminate the state property tax, repeal the Green New Scam to lower the cost of energy, repeal no fault to lower the cost of insurance, and increase incomes. And that's how you make sure everybody can make it in Michigan.
Yeah, $5,000. Woof, man, that would pay a lot of bills these days. And people need that.
That was 7 or 8 years ago, but still, it definitely would help a lot of folks.
Close enough. What is the one hard truth that no one's willing to say out loud about what's going on in Michigan right now?
Well, I think it really comes down to education. I mean, instead of teaching the 26 letters of the alphabet, we're seeing these schools teaching 26 pronouns. And I was just in Wayne County recently and talking to a parent actually over in the Grosse Points, and they had a sixth grader, a 12-year-old, that refused to use a they, them pronoun in class, instead used the he, him pronoun, and the teacher sent him down to the principal's office. And God bless this kid. When he got down to the principal's office, he goes, I thought with President Trump in office that we didn't have to do this nonsense anymore. Is the next governor of Michigan, I'm going to have that kid's back. And we need to have that kid's back to make sure that every kid's able to read by 4th grade, to make sure that parents have a choice of where they send their kids to school. And also, I think the last 25 years, we've told a half a generation of lie where the trades weren't an option. College was the only option. And I look at somebody like my brother, my oldest brother. 35 years ago, he was one of those C-average students, but boy, he was street smart. He could tear apart a transmission, rebuild it on a weekend, put it all back together without a bucket of bolts left over. That was always my challenge. I'd usually have a bucket of bolts left over. But if you would have, he spent his junior year doing diesel mechanics at the local vocational center. He spent his senior year at a farm implement dealership, and he had a job on day one without a day of college and without any college loans. And if you would have forced him to take 2 years of a foreign language just to get a D, or algebra 2 just to get a D, that would have discouraged him him, not done anything for the economy, not done anything for the society. Instead, we had a program allowing him to find what his spark was, his best interest. I was talking to a kid the other day, and I say kid because I remember when I was 22, I hate being called a kid, but so talking to a 22-year-old, right? And he didn't know there was really other options besides just going straight to college.
Right.
And he did 5 semesters, dropped out, had $35,000 of debt, went back, did some training as a med tech, graduated for a few-month program with being a med tech, is doing fine if it wasn't for that $35,000 of college debt that he has to pay off. And that's the challenge that we have right now is making sure that every kid is ready to learn, making sure we find what each kid's spark is and building up that instructional support. And as I look at it, if states like Mississippi, that's 49th in income, that's a lot poorer than even Michigan is able to do it. Michigan is a top 20 spending state in education. Shouldn't be 44th. We should be a top 10 state. And it's about making sure that our kids are prepared because we know if they're not reading at fourth grade level by then, that they have a nearly 70% chance of doing one of two things in life being on social welfare at some point or being in jail at some point. Boy, that paints a very dark and grim picture for the future of Michigan.
Yes, it does. And talking about that, what's one specific policy from Lansing that is seems to be that's glaringly obvious that's making life more expensive for Michiganders?
But overall, it's the state property tax. We need to repeal the state property tax.
Yes, agreed.
I've been to all 83 counties in the state of Michigan, only governor candidate that's hit all 83 counties. I started early and did that on purpose to listen to folks from Melvindale to Marquette to Muskegon to Port Huron. And listening to those stories is that I hear is that it's just tough to make it in Michigan. And the property taxes, we got to repeal the state property tax. The one thing I'm going to pledge to folks that I'm going to do, I'm going to repeal the state property tax, repeal the personal property tax to lower the cost for small businesses, and force the utilities to roll back their rates by $1 billion. And that's how you make sure our families can finally start making it in Michigan by lowering the cost of living.
And that's perfect. My gosh. Housing, utilities, and then the dreaded thing in Michigan, car insurance. Every governor has promised or tried to fix car insurance. What can you do to, or just some principles, to kind of help us get in that direction? I know everybody tried, right? I don't think there's a lack of effort from wanting, right? I think a lot of people want to see where's that going.
No, there is because there's some groups and some special interest groups that actually make a lot of money off the current system. Trial lawyers, our healthcare system, some of these folks, instead of making sure that our drivers and seniors and families are first and foremost. And so I would say you repeal no fault and copy and paste either Ohio or Wisconsin's auto insurance laws. I mean, heck, I was talking to a couple that moved from Illinois to Michigan, and Illinois is the most expensive, state to live in the Midwest. But they moved here and they said they're paying 3 times as much for their auto insurance than they were in Illinois. And so you don't have to go too far for examples, is that you have to start off by eliminating no fault, provide that competition, hold the insurance companies accountable, root out the waste, fraud, and abuse in the system, and make sure that folks are able to pay their fair price. I've talked to too many people that can't afford insurance, and so they go without, and you see that too much of the time here in Michigan.
Yeah, my family, we ended up switching about a year or two ago because they had great rates, and then all of a sudden got a bill one day and it doubled, and I'm like, I don't have anything that went on my record. Why is I got good credit? Why is this doubling? It was just so puzzling. And when we called an insurance company, they were like, "Well, if you go to somebody else, you'll probably get a better rate. We can't give you a better rate though. But if
Yeah.
you come back in a year or two, we can give you a better rate." And I'm like, "What?"
And unfortunately, reform 7 years ago, Whitmer refused to go far enough to actually repeal no fault and the lower rates.
Right.
And we know that Jocelyn Benson is actually going to do the opposite. She's in bed with the trial lawyers. It's going to mean higher insurance rates for Michigan families. And I was up in Menominee a little bit ago, southern tip of the Upper Peninsula, right on the Wisconsin border. And I was going through these neighborhoods. I was talking to a local guy. Why are there so many Wisconsin plates? I know we're next door, but is that many people visit? He goes, no. A lot of people lie about their addresses, and register their cars in Wisconsin because the rates are so much cheaper. It's only a matter of time where these people and businesses actually move across the border to the other state, and that's lost opportunities for Michigan. And so that's something that we need to take care of is lowering the cost of insurance, lowering the cost of energy by repealing the Green New Scam that the Democrats passed a few years ago, property tax.
No, and I mean, that's key. I mean, the property tax will insanely fix a lot of people's lives. And I don't even think a lot of people who rent realize how much that will help offset future increases on them.
Hundreds of dollars a month for folks that rent. Yes.
Yeah, and that is something that I have looked into, because I own my own house, thankfully outright, and, not a lot of people would
But
got
those
lucky.
this is the point, you can't rent the American dream, you should be
No.
able to own the
Yes.
American. And when the
Yes.
Democrats, when Jocelyn Benson, when Gretchen Whitmer talk about housing, what they talk about is more government subsidies. So they're gonna take more money out of your wallet, make owning a house less affordable. I mean, hell, 2 years ago, Governor Whitmer had a proposal for housing that would increase the real estate transfer tax, which would increase the amount of people would pay to buy a house and then put it in an affordable housing fund. That's the opposite of what you need to do to make housing more affordable. And as I look at the key elements is one, no free housing for illegal immigrants. I'm going to join with President Trump to deport every criminal illegal from the state of Michigan. You got to get back to the trades so you have folks that can actually do construction and heating and air conditioning, plumbing, electrical work so that you actually can find folks to build. You got to scrap the bureaucracy and unnecessary rules and regulations. You go up to the Home Builders Association of Michigan did a study, and they figured between federal, state, and local rules that the average new home costs $95,000 more because of government mandates. I don't know about you, but as a farm boy, $9,000 is a lot of money. And so, as the next governor of Michigan, I'm going to take a flamethrower to the bureaucracy and red tape coming out in Lansing and make sure people actually get real relief so they can afford afford housing and actually own a piece of the American dream instead of just run.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense, and geez, I didn't realize it was that much, on top of just from the red tape on top of the price of a house. Good lord.
Yeah,
That's insane.
I was talking to a developer in Livingston County recently, and he goes, "That seems awfully high." Like, well, go back, do your paper, see what it looks like. And a few weeks later, he comes back. I come up to $91,000. I'm like, well, that's pretty damn close.
Right.
So,
I mean, that's good math real time. I
yeah.
think a lot of people their jaws are gonna hit the floor as soon as they hear that number, and they
But
might
when you
need a truck
talk
to pick them up.
when when I talk to somebody in northern Macomb County and a new house, is ranch style, 1,600 square feet, 3 bed, 2 bath, is running 400 grand. I mean, that's
Jesus.
out of reach for way too many working families. And when the average family in Michigan makes $9,000 less than the average family does nationally, we have a problem, Michigan. We have a problem here in Michigan. We gotta shake up the status quo. Gotta take a blowtorch to the bureaucracy in Lansing. And we gotta start building again, start investing again, allowing free people to actually build it again.
Yeah, and that's key. And thinking of that, right? And we talk about building the future. Why are so many young, talented people leaving the state when you have things like what Ford has done, with the train depot that I don't think anybody ever expected to get, refurbished and then somehow it happened.
Yeah, it starts with opportunity. And one, the bleak picture we saw with education when 3 out of 5 fourth graders can't read at grade level paints a very grim picture for the future of the state when we know nearly 70% will either end up on social welfare or in jail at some point. I want to paint a very different picture, one where everybody can actually make it here in Michigan. And that starts with actually job creators. One, making sure that we can allow folks to invest and grow here in the state. And whether it's a manufacturer in Holland that is trying to replace their docks, they build boats, and they're 5 years in, $2 million of engineering and legal costs, and they still don't have a permit from Whitmer's bureaucracy to build their docks.
Jeez.
We have a problem. I mean, this is 700 employees 700 people that work at this factory, fourth generation family business. We know that North Carolina and Georgia will be doing backflips to get a company like this. Or whether it's a restaurant owner in Adrian, when I was doing my tractor town hall tour through the southern part of the state. And and down there, the restaurant owner I was talking to says, I'm done. This is my last day. I can't make it in Michigan anymore. I survived COVID, but the last few years with the new mandates and labor laws and taxes and property taxes, I just can't make it. 12 people are going to lose their jobs. I'm moving back. back to Ohio, and it's done. And you never hear about those reports on the front page of the paper. I'm going to have her back as the next governor. I'm going to make sure we repeal the state property tax and take a flamethrower to the bureaucracy and the red tape out of Lansing to make sure that job creators and our families can actually make it here in Michigan again.
Yeah, and that's key. M- Reading and math scores, they matter a lot. We were talking about Mississippi a little bit ago. What are like some of the key things that, we can do in the state to really turn those around? And I think is not just as much as policy, I think it's that confidence that people are missing that really is a roadblock as well.
And so it starts with a few things. One is the last few years, what you've seen out of the Democrats in Lansing and Governor Whitmer is they repealed a third grade reading law. She vetoed scholarships for fourth graders that are behind in reading from COVID shutdowns. They shut down our schools. I mean, the
Mm.
average student in Michigan's three-quarters of grade level because of the COVID lockdowns. And so what I'm going to do is governor is follow a model that actually works in other states. That model means that you have science-based phonics reading to make sure that it works. You got to build up that support with literacy coaches for our teachers, teaching that phonics-based science of reading. And then in third grade, if they're still behind, you do intensive tutoring. You provide some opportunities for those kids to really catch up on their reading scores. And then if they're not there, the final bit is that you just don't promote them to the fourth grade until they're able to read at that grade level. And what we found is it works in other states, is that what we found is that it builds up success. And long term, it's going to make a world of difference for those kids to find that spark of what they want to do and how to make it actually in Michigan again.
And that's key. I mean, those are very key things. And that really plays into, we were talking about skilled trades earlier, and with EVs coming down the pipeline and those jobs, like how do we look at that just from like your perspective? Because that's skilled trades are important. We were talking about everybody being forced to go to college, or
Well,
being told that that's what they have to do, I should say.
I mean,
And
Mike Rowe said it pretty well last year in Dearborn. He was speaking at the Mackinac Center's annual event. And Mike Rowe put it bluntly, he goes, for every 5 people retiring from the trades right now, there's only 2 people replacing them. And if you're going to rebuild our infrastructure, our manufacturing base, and our economy, you got to get back to basics so that folks, these skilled tradespeople, can actually build things in Michigan again. And it starts with with high school by making sure that everybody has their basics in reading, writing, and arithmetic, but then all offering those options in 11th and 12th grade for folks they want to go on and cut hair or do photography or become a welder or become a pipe fitter, go into construction, allow that to happen, allow 11th and 12th graders to actually work with their hands again and get involved and go out and explore. And so I think there's just a little different concept over the last 25 years where we've gotten away from actually people working with their hands. And these are jobs that can't be replaced with AI, jobs that can't be exported. And if we're going to be serious about making us energy abundant, we got to have folks that are willing to work with their hands.
that's key. And speaking of folks that work with their hands, public safety, our police officers, there's a huge distrust of authority across America right now, especially with the police considering, the public sentiment. How do we get back to that where it's the law enforcement can do their jobs in rural and in, urban areas without this natural that has seemed to develop this natural clash?
Yeah, the last 8 years under Governor Whitmer, the Democrats in Lansing, law enforcement's been kicked around, spit on, and really disrespected. And they were there as a mask police during COVID. And then you have these left wing lunatics saying, "Hey, what we need to do is cashless bond, no cash bonds for violent felons." I mean, that's ridiculous. That we have to get back and really say, law enforcement, we have your back. There's a place for social welfare workers. There's a place for law enforcement officials. And as I travel the state, I've toured probably 2.5 dozen jails around the state. And unfortunately, in too many of our counties, and I'd say just about every county, that the largest mental health institution in each of these counties is the county jail. That needs to end. Some people need to have long-term institutionalized mental health help. We got to bring back some mental health hospitals to make sure people have their work. I remember I
Agreed.
was talking to the sheriff up in Benzie, and kind of the pinky of the state. And he goes, we drop off somebody, at the hospital in Traverse City, and they beat us back home. And if we want a long-term bed, I have to have 2 troopers drive all the way down to Indianapolis, 7 hours down there, 7 hours back, 2-hour trip. There isn't those options here. As the next governor, I'm gonna make sure those options are there. There's a reason why I've had 20-some sheriffs endorse me, is because they know I'm gonna have their back in law enforcement. And unfortunately, with in Michigan, we still have 2 of the 10 most dangerous cities in America, Saginaw and Detroit. That's going to end as the next governor. I'm going to join with President Trump to ban sanctuary cities, to make sure local law enforcement's working with state law enforcement's working with federal law enforcement, and make sure I have their back, and make sure prosecutors have the resources they need to be able to convict these criminals and put them away in jail.
Yeah, I really like that you said the mental health. There's a lot of, we talk about public safety with the school shootings, this, that. There seems to always be one theme. The person had mental health problems long before that point. And to me, it just reflected, I mean, the way you said that spot on to me is at a lot of the core of a lot of the issues that we have going on in terms of crime. There's a lot of people who, in the right situation, probably wouldn't be like that, if they had the correct help.
And unfortunately, over the years, the left, a lot on the left believe there's not evil in this world. And I'm sorry, with what I've seen on, uh, working with police and prosecutors, there's real evil in this world. And sometimes people just need to be put away and have the key thrown away.
Yes. No, most definitely you will never get an argument out of me, and I don't think out of any sane person on that one. I mean, there is just there's some people that you could give them, I use the analogy, you could give them $1,000,000 and they would be mad that you didn't give them 1,000,001. Not happy that you gave them 1,000,000. They're mad, and it's the same with crime. It's just some people just are the way they are, and we have to do our best to defend ourselves.
Well, you see it with woke prosecutors. You saw that at the Michigan State shooting, where a woke prosecutor didn't follow through on some earlier, um, crimes that happened, and didn't do the full prosecution, and people are dead because of that.
Yeah,
Young
and that's
that were never able to reach their potential are dead because of that. And that those hands are on that prosecutor that didn't do that work, that didn't follow through, and that's a shame. And unfortunately, we have the Washtenaw County prosecutor that refuses to prosecute some crimes in Washington. He's running to be the state's attorney general, Eli Savitt. And this is the point of the general election this fall in Michigan, is that we're at a real turning point. And Republicans have a real prosecutor of Eaton County, Doug Lloyd, running, ready to prosecute criminals and respect the rule of law. And the Democrats have a woke prosecutor that believes in cashless bonds for violent felons, and a revolving door policy that's wrong. And it's on the ballot this fall. And this is the importance of this year's election.
yeah, people need to realize that midterms are just as important as presidential elections, if not more, really. I wish that, I had told you before, I'm big on states' rights and state issues. And I feel like the midterms are probably where a lot of things are, the devil's in the details, they always say, right? And when thinking about that, where I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. So, what does public safety actually mean? Because, we were talking about this, right? Just as like a broader term, like putting that under an umbrella for people to kind of understand.
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with leadership at the top. And unfortunately, here in Michigan, with what's been historically the premier state law enforcement agency in the nation, the Michigan State Police, is they've had corrupt, bad leadership for the last several years. It's more concerned with DEI in the ranks than actual doing the job. Last year, the Michigan State Troopers Association did a poll of their frontline troopers, and 98.5% had no confidence with the leadership of the Michigan State Police. And the governor is able to fire him today, tomorrow. I've called on the governor to do that. She won't. And they're having real problems recruiting new state police officers. I mean, you know it. Historically, cops are the best recruiters for the profession. And unfortunately, you talk to a lot of them now in Michigan, is that they feel really disrespected. They feel spit on. The media has shited them. And as the next governor, I'm going to lift them up. I'm going to have their backs. And they know that.
Right, and that's key. Governing beyond gridlock, right? I love the gridlock, and that's kind of talking about that. Is if Democrats have a good idea, I know that's hard to think of sometimes. Will you work with them publicly? Because that's something that people in Michigan are always going to want to ask.
I mean, I'm going to work with anybody that wants to truly lower costs for working families. That means eliminating the state property tax. That means repealing the green use scam to lower families' energy costs by $2,800 a year. That means repealing no fault to make sure that we have a competitive insurance market to lower the costs in half for people paying auto insurance. And I'm willing to work with anybody if it means to actually taking a flamethrower to the bureaucracy and red tape and Lansing.
Yes.
I mean, heck, if you could follow your pizza on a Domino's app on whether it's in the oven or where it's at in the driveway, you should be able to follow where your permit is in the process on a basic app. And unfortunately, under the bureaucracy and red tape out of Lansing, it's just not working. Nobody's getting it, and we're having missed opportunities. And I'm willing to work with anybody. That means that every kid's able to read by third grade. Every parent's able to have choice of where they send their schools. And if it means that they're actually learning the ABCs instead of the woke nonsense we see, or it means protecting my daughter to make sure if she plays sports someday in high school that she doesn't have to shower with another male. That's
Right.
just some of the nonsense that 10 years ago, who thought it was even going to be a debate? And so this is a reminder that over the last several years, unfortunately, what we've seen from the left is continued violence, continued threats. I mean, just this last weekend, there was another assassination attempt on President Trump. You saw when Democrats brought in a podcaster, a media influencer that, Piker, that actually said America deserved 9/11. And this is somebody that, somebody who could, I think, actually will win the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate.
Wow.
Abdul Al Saeed actually brought in, what's the guy's name? Hassan Piker to campaign with them. I mean, we people need to call balls and strikes right and wrong. And as the next governor, I'm going to work with anybody that's going to lower costs, provide opportunities for working families and job creators, and make sure there's accountability and choice in education. But I'm also going to oppose anybody that's going to not allow boys to be boys or girls to be girls as they're growing up.
Right, no, and that's key, especially about Pike. I mean, that's just woof. That guy, I had been reading. I've read a little bit about it, but I haven't like gone too deep into detail. But I've definitely gotten wind of some of it, and it's amazing to me how anybody, whether you're Republican or Democrat, or really any Democrat, can have somebody sitting there, And this isn't for me personally, like attacking them. It's just going, you represent the American people, and this guy's saying they deserve something. How can anybody that is a politician or running for office honestly sit there and be like, I'm okay with that?
The likely Democrat nominee for governor, Jocelyn Benson, the current Secretary of State, worst Secretary of State ever, was on the board of the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yes.
One where the Department of Justice just recently said they were financing racist groups such as the KKK, neo Nazis, and fascists, groups that they said they were opposed to, but apparently they have financed to grow the hatred so that they have something to fight. This is ridiculous. And this is the kind of exposure that the new media, like what you're doing, and podcasts and others, need to continue to uncover and bring to light, because unfortunately the mainstream media continues to ignore what the Democrats do in their hypocrisy. I mean, can you imagine this? Can you imagine an environmental group pushing oil into a river and then doing a marketing campaign and saying, hey, we got to clean up this river? That's exactly what the Southern Poverty Law Center did with racist groups. It's wrong. It needs to end. And Jocelyn Benson needs to be held accountable because this happened when she was on the board.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree 1000% on that. I had done a story, I won't go too long into it, is on paid protesting with a company called Crowds on Demand. And I learned a lot about how a good chunk of some of that works. And then when I heard about this, I was like, oh man, everything that guy told me it was like literally like a prophecy he had told me about, hey, this is how it kind of works. And then that came out and he pretty much called it. And I was very, very shocked. And he actually pushes for transparency. Things that any group that does something like that should have to publicly put on wherever it's at, who's giving them the money.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. A couple, as we wind down here, just a couple random quick questions, I guess if you want to call it, about Michigan. A little bit more lighthearted. Best underrated city in Michigan.
Best underrated city in Michigan. What I love, so if you ever been to Houghton, it's
Oh
just
yeah, like
Houghton up in the Upper Peninsula. It just the river around the lakes, going up to the Keweenaw. It's just gorgeous. And then going to the Calumet City, it's just you could see how the old copper country really operated. And so I really enjoy my time up there in the Upper Peninsula.
I think I've been there once. Gosh, I don't know. I was probably 8 or 9 years old. I vaguely remember it. Spent a lot of time in the Lower Peninsula. One key thing that's going to be on every Michigander's mind here, and Are the Lions going to make the Super Bowl soon? Can you make that happen for us?
I can't change the weather, and I'm not a football coach, but I'll tell you one thing. The first hat that I got my now 4-year-old, he was 3 years old last year. My son was a Lions hat, and I hope he hasn't doesn't go through life like I've had to have. So this is the year they're going to do it. Let's win, and not just make it to the Super Bowl, but actually bring home bring home the rings.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Campbell, I mean, literally, if there was ever a coach out there that was Michigan really in like an embodied person, he just matches the state and just the fact that, I don't know if you know, he used to play here in Detroit for several years.
Yeah, no, his attitude and his gumption to never give up and really raise him up to that next level. God bless him, and God bless him for staying. So many coaches like that would have been picked up, but I'm sure he's gotten a lot bigger offers. But he seems committed to Detroit, and God bless him for that.
Yeah, and here's one final question. What can Michigan do if they lead? I'm sorry, I'll edit that. Michigan can lead again if they do what?
They eliminate the state property tax.
There we go, and that's what I love. Senator, I really appreciate you giving us your time today.
Well, thanks for having me on. Thanks for taking. I'd like to just end real quick with something that
Sure.
America's celebrating 250 years as a country.
Yes, we are.
We're a young country with the oldest constitution in the world. And there's a reason for that. But as I travel around the state, this little white farm boy from Southwest Michigan, uh, President Trump showed there's a big coalition you need to grow around the state, very diverse state that we have. And I was sitting down in the group of Middle Eastern business owners in Wayne County, and one of them was about my age. Came here when he was 12, immigrated here when he was 12, and he grew his family's little two car garage shop into a multi-million dollar auto parts refurbishment business. He's very successful. And he goes, I couldn't have done this anywhere else in the world. And I pushed back a little bit on him and I go, well, there's other countries, this free market economic system, the rule of law, private property rights, the core that makes us succeed as a nation. And he goes, no, the problem is you go to Paris and there's 4 generations of Algerians and they're still Algerian, they're not French. You go to Berlin, and there's 4 generations of Turks and they're still Turkish, they're not German. He looks me in the eye, he goes, I'm an American. My kids are an American. You and I might have a different religion, but I'm a capitalist. And I asked him, why is that? And he goes, it's those radicals 250 years ago that decided that the individual is more important than the state, that families are more important than government, that's given us that opportunity. And as we go in to celebrate 250 years as a country, I think it's important to realize as I travel around the state that most people just want government in the background. They want schools that work, roads that they can drive on. If they want to raise their families how they see fit, not how the government sees fit. They want to be able, if they start a business, to have that opportunity that their dad or grandfather had to make it here in Michigan. That's why I'm running for governor, is that everybody, no matter what walks of life or their backgrounds, can actually make it here in the state of Michigan. And so I appreciate you letting me tell that story and
Oh, I
look
love it.
forward to engaging folks around the state.
Well, I appreciate that. And everybody, his campaign website and everything you need will be down in the description. Give them check out. Remember, it's important that you know your leaders because that's how we decide our future. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I hope you have a good day.